Good afternoon. A very warm welcome to our Conversations program. My name's Emily Butler. I'm the Conversations curator here at Art Basel. Hello to our audiences who are watching online. I'm really delighted that we're joined this afternoon by three experts. We have Dr. Clare McAndrew, who's the founder of Arts Economics, Elena Soboleva, who's the global head of online sales at David Zwirner, Florence Bonnefous, who's the co-founder of Air de Paris. And they will be offering their perspectives today on the pivot towards digital technologies and the shifting geographies of the art market, as well as some thoughts on the UBS Global Art Market 2022 report. The talk is moderated by Melanie Gerlis, and we wish to thank UBS for their ongoing collaboration on the production of the report. The conversation is going to last approximately 50 minutes, so we'll have 10 minutes for questions at the end. We'll be passing some mics around the room, so please wait for the mic to ask your questions. We are also going to be keeping an eye on the questions online, so feel free to pop any questions in the chat, and I will relay them to the speakers. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the conversation, and I'm going to hand over to Melanie, and please give our speakers a very warm round of applause and enjoy the conversation.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you all for joining us to hear about the art market in 2022. What next? I have been a fairly close observer of the art market for nearly 20 years, and I don't think it's ever been more difficult to predict. But luckily, that's not my job today. As Emily said, I have an extremely capable panel in front of me. We will start. Claire will give us a short presentation that outlines her findings from the art market last year, but also, I think, with a little bit of extra information into the first 6 months of this year. And then between us all, I will lead a discussion into the implications this might have for the next 6 months and beyond. And of course, as Emily said, we'll open it up to your questions about 10 minutes before the end. But I will stop talking and let you do some talking. Claire, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Melanie. Thanks very much. I mean, as you said, it's been quite a kind of a ride for the art market over the last few years. After, things were happening, but it was a relatively stable period. And obviously in 2020, we saw the biggest recession in more than 10 years since the global financial crisis. But it pulled back very strongly in 2021. So sales were up by 29% to just over 65 billion. So we saw a lot of kind of interesting things last year. Some of them, changes that you never possibly could have foreseen a few years ago. And then some things that have been kind of percolating on the surface for quite a while. So it's been, as Melanie was saying, it's a really interesting time to be observing the art market. In terms of most of the regions improved on aggregate as well. I mean, the kind of research I do presents findings that are very aggregated, so you lose some of the detail. But on aggregate, most of the regions did pretty well. US sales were up. It's still by far the biggest market, 43% of the value of sales. China had a really strong year. Values in China were up by 35%, so just over 13 billion, and it shifted into second place. So it was kind of neck and neck with the UK for years, and it's moved into second place. And actually all of the bigger Asian markets did pretty well. So Japan, South Korea, China, all did very well last year in terms of improvement on 2020. I know it's not a great benchmark to improve from, but they all recovered very well. Europe was a little bit more sluggish. The EU did very well, and France actually overall had one of its best years in terms of aggregate sales in about 10 years. So it was increased by 50%, which is one of the biggest increases of the major markets. But the UK, which is still the kind of powerhouse of sales in Europe, was a little bit more sluggish. I mean, sales did improve on 2020 by 14%, but it kind of shifted back into third place and just 20% to 17% of sales overall. Looking at the different segments of the market, I mean, the dealer segment did come back strongly last year. It increased by 18%. Still not back to where it was in 2019, but it did improve. And I suppose what a lot of people were hoping for was this kind of curve would change a little bit, this familiar pattern of the higher end doing better than the lower end. And we did see that a little bit in 2020. Actually, some of the smaller galleries and mid-sized galleries did quite well, and it was actually the biggest galleries that had some of the biggest year-on-year losses. But when things started gaining momentum again last year, we saw that re-emerging again, that the high end very much driving sales, and in terms of the aggregate changes year-on-year, some of the bigger galleries doing better than the smaller galleries. And actually, if you break that down, that last column of the under 250 to the under 100,000, the smallest galleries, they actually saw a decline in sales last year from the galleries that we surveyed. So it's still, although it was an improvement, that the aggregate figures can sometimes mask a little bit of this color that's going on underneath. I suppose the biggest thing everyone was looking at for the last few years is the change in how sales were being made, and this is what we're kind of looking at today as well. And the big thing was fair sales. They'd been such a huge portion of gallery sales up to 2019. They got up to 43% of sales, and they plummeted, obviously, in 2020 as all the events and things were cancelled. And they did come back last year, but we didn't really get a perfect year to look at fair sales again. So they did come back a little bit, but not fully to the regular thing. So it's still nowhere near where it was in 2019, but we did see an improvement last year in fair sales. The corollary of that, of course, which hopefully we'll talk a bit more about today, is online sales. And you can really see there that, you know, they shot up, and it was a lifeline for a lot of galleries in 2020. And then they have reduced again. If you don't include art fair OVRs, they went from 30, and then they've gone now and reduced back to 20%. So it's still a huge increase on where they were in 2019, but things kind of coming back again. And I mean, it's interesting, whoever I've spoken to, obviously they've invested very heavily in a lot of digital programs, some of them doing it for the first time as a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to what was going on, and some of them developing programs that they've been working on for many years. And I think it's one of those things, once it's been invested in, it's very, I think most people will keep it up. So it seems to be one of those more permanent changes from the last couple of years. And it's interesting, if you look there even at art fair OVRs, they made a big feature in 2020 and have shrunk right back to 2%. So there's very mixed views. It'd be interesting to hear what the galleries think of them, just because, you know, some people found them useful in 2020, but, you know, I think everyone kind of says there's nothing like the real thing when it comes to art fairs. Online, obviously, this is kind of galleries and dealers put together, was obviously a huge story for the last couple of years. And it really, despite the market falling in 2020, it really it doubled in value from 6 billion to over 12 billion in 2020. And then, as we've seen, the share of online sales dropped, but because the market was going up, it still did grow, but at a more kind of normal level last year, so it was up 7%. And I think one of the most interesting features to come out of the pandemic is that the art market's always been behind other industries in terms of the share of online sales, so it's been a kind of real laggard in terms of the amount of online sales it does relative to offline sales. It went ahead of normal retail in 2020, and now it's about on par. So it's been a kind of a catch-up phase, I suppose, for the art market versus other industries. I suppose the segment that was a little bit ahead online already was the auction sector. I guess partially because they had a lot of online-only selling anyway, and also that just a lot of the actual buying was outside of the room, whether it was by phone or online bidding, or, you know, the event itself wasn't key, and being there in person wasn't key, which is a newer thing for a lot of galleries. And they had a really successful year last year. If you include an increase in private sales of about 1/3 and a 47% increase in offline public sales, the sector as a whole increased by 45%. So a very strong comeback for auctions, but that was after 2 years of decline as well. So it did relatively better than the dealer sector, but the dealer sector had done better earlier. And a lot of that was stuff being held back. That it wasn't a great year to sell things in 2020, so people did hold back. So some good things coming onto the market, and we even saw that this year as well. And also the auction sector has been really successful in getting new buyers as well. It seems to be a very easy access point for people coming into the market. It's straightforward. The prices they're visible, and you bid on things, and you can access prices online and that kind of thing. So it seems to be an easier way for some people to enter into the art market also. What really drove the sales was the high end, and it's the 10 million plus segment in the auction sector that really dictates a lot of what's going on. It's the kind of grey line on the top, and you can see everything kind of had a little bit of an upswing last year, but it was this segment had a huge a huge year-on-year growth. And a lot of that driven by the fact that the rich have got richer over the last couple of years, and that's very different to other recessions and crises we've had in the past. Even in the global financial crisis, billionaire wealth, for example, plummeted. It had a big double-digit decline. But in 2020, billionaires added about a third to their wealth, and in 2021 a further 20%. And it's also the top billionaires that are driving that increase as well. So it's not just the top of the pyramid; it's the very, very top of the pyramid that's driving that. And this does have an influence on that top end of the art market for sure. We picked this up very, very clearly in the high net worth surveys that we do with UBS Investor Watch as well. We did them across 10 markets, and it's jaw-dropping really, the figures when you see them from 2019 through to 2021. This is the median expenditure of high net worth collectors. Now, they're a particular sample, they're a small group, fair enough, but it's just amazing. In most markets, they increased not only during the pandemic, but they also plummeted up. A lot of them are more than double the level they were in 2021. And this is median as well, so it's the middle spending. It's not influenced by the huge high spenders or the very, very low spenders. And you can see there, that's just another example of the amount of people spending over $1 million. It's doubled from 2019 to 2021. So this is the wealth thing. I'm nearly sure that's wealth is driving some of that, the increase in billionaire and high net worth wealth. What they're spending their money on, obviously paintings and sculptures and the more traditional mediums were the most popular overall in terms of its value of spending. But you can see there 11% in digital art, and 70% of the high net worth collectors that we surveyed, so there was about over 2,000 collectors we got responses from, had bought an NFT. And obviously NFTs were a huge story last year. A lot of the activity going on outside our traditional world here of galleries and auctions, a lot of it happening on NFT platforms. But we did include data in the report last year on NFTs, and that's gone from, this is just art and collectibles, gone from about 5 billion in 2019 to 11 billion last year. So it's a huge increase and a lot of interest in what's happening there. It's obviously a very volatile and speculative market. So this is from data from nonfungible.com. They gave me this is the first 5 months of the year. So from January through to the 1st of June. And you can see the sales, both the line is the volume and the bars are the columns are the value of sales. For art-related, for all NFTs, but particularly art-related NFTs going down significantly. And some of that, of course, is what's happening in the cryptocurrencies. Obviously, if you look at Ethereum versus the US dollar, it's declined about 60% in the last 6 months. But you can see there, it's not just that, it's the volume of sales. So the activity in the sector is going on. So the market was really saturated, both in terms of the number of sales and also in terms of people's attention. I think it was so much focus on it that it's kind of, I think I was saying to Melanie the other day, it's either kind of saturated or stabilized, depending on what kind of who you talk to. But it is a very volatile and a very speculative marketplace. A lot of the interesting things we got from the data were things like the fact that an art NFT, the average time it's turned over in is just over a month. So, I always compare it to painting sales, which the average turnover in the auction market is 30 years. The average art-related NFT turns over, it changes hands every 31 days. So it's an amazing, very, very speculative market. One thing, before we kind of write it off completely, is just to compare the value now versus, a couple of years back. So although it has taken a kind of a decrease in value, we're still seeing huge amounts traded. In the first half of the year, up to June 1st, anyway, there was 900 million traded in art-related NFTs, and that compares to, if you go back to 2019, that same period, there was less than 150,000. So it's still, we're going back to maybe early 2021 levels in terms of monthly trading values, but it's certainly, although it's bearish, it's still very big. And it's the same, as I said, with volumes. It's gone down, but it's still, way above where it was recently. So just to finish with, what's happening looking forward. I mean, obviously, I do the main kind of research and surveys and things at the end of each year. And when we checked in with collectors at the end of the year, everybody was very enthusiastic about buying and selling. I mean, there's great interest there in digital art. Over half of the collectors we surveyed interested in buying digital art, but great plans to buy and sell and attend art fairs. The same with dealers. Nearly all of the dealers, the majority in all of the segments that we looked at, were enthusiastic about their sales this year versus the previous year. I suppose the least pessimism at the highest end again. And just in terms of the changes, I mean, everyone very keen to get back to art fairs. A lot of the dealers that we asked saw it as a kind of a more of a temporary change. I think people are definitely looking at art fairs and how they participate and how many they participate in, but there was a great enthusiasm and they saw it as a temporary change. But one thing that's very clear there is the amount of people that saw increased online content and communication and increased online sales as a permanent change from the pandemic. So I think that the kind of thing I've heard most from galleries I've spoken to is that how they're really kind of firing on all cylinders and probably working twice as hard as they ever have. So it's going to be another, I think, very, very busy year for galleries.
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you for getting the updated information on NFTs, which I'm sure we will talk about. One thing that strikes me is that we obviously spent, when we first talked about your report, we were talking about a post-pandemic and the impact of post-pandemic in some places, and the impact of that pandemic on the future, but a lot has actually happened since. We've had Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and through the fair yesterday, quite a lot of people were talking about a kind of economic Armageddon, with some commentators calling for a recession, not for a recession. And I just wondered, I suppose, as we have our gallerists, our brilliant gallerists here. I mean, Florence, you've got a Rob Pruitt work on your booth that you chose because it has the colours of the Ukraine flag. And you were making a point, but I just wondered how you see that situation unfolding within our world.
Well, it's bad. I've been happy when I visited Lister 2 days ago to hear about this Russian gallery we could not attend, and we gave away its space to an Ukrainian gallery from Kiev, the Naked Room. So I really recommend to everyone to go to Lister and check this gallery out and support, because this is a beautiful gesture. It's not only about supporting with financial support and money, but it's also about sharing the conditions that are brought from this war. And yes, I wanted to bring a painting by Rob Pruitt, and it happened that in my inventory I had this beautiful abstract suicide painting, which has the color of the Ukraine flag, but was painted in 2017, not being even, I think, in a forecast. Just it happened, and so I chose that one as a tiny personal community.
But you mostly see the sort of positives from our world in terms of galvanizing fundraisers and activities and reaching out?
Well, it's been amazing, in particular also between the community of artists that have supported themselves with incredible energy. It's always a bit, if I may point that the amount of support for the Ukraine community is way high than migrants from other African countries, from Somalia, from Afghanistan, which I personally don't see a reason why. But yes, we've not been testimonies of like a real community support, and this is great.
Yes. Good, thank you. Elena, can I ask you more prosaically about the market and some of the dynamics surrounding, including obviously the invasion of Ukraine, but the stock markets tumbling, cryptocurrencies crashing, and we're all in these big halls watching people buy a Felix Gonzalez Torres for $12.5 million. I mean, do you see? Are you worried? Are you planning for a recession?
Great question, and I think we are. It's top of everyone's mind here is the contrast of the economic activity we're all reading on the front page of the FT versus the amazing fair that many of us have had, and really the support of collectors and the density of just excitement and talent that is here. So I think that it is a contrast we're seeing, but to the charts that were just highlighted, I think the reality is that the ultra high net worth individuals are probably not feeling that, or right now not reacting to it in the same way, since we're really seeing amazing collector activity, and many of the dealers I've spoken with are really happy with this year, and really happy to just be back at the right moment in June in this sort of really culmination of the art season.
Claire, is it fair, in a way, what Elena is doing is correlating, and as you have done, is correlating wealth with the growth of the art market, but actually probably that those top billionaires are still okay, therefore, for now? Yeah,
they can be very insulated from what's going on, but I mean, we did see that even in the global financial crisis. I think even the optics sometimes of making big purchases and when people are looking to sell, particularly in the secondary market, they do care about how the general context is. So, I mean, even if it doesn't necessarily pinch their pockets or their portfolios, I mean, it's the same when people were kind of going broke and everything in 2009. It wasn't a great time to be flashing your latest multi-million-dollar purchase. So it does kind of filter down in different ways. But certainly in the secondary market, people are waiting so long in the wings for things to come onto the market that if you can encourage people to sell, they will certainly always be buyers there.
And of course, we're seeing auction houses, and I'm sure dealers encouraging people to sell quite effectively. So.
Well, I mean, I think that's going to be the interesting part, is that with the prices being sort of inelastic, it's going to be really the volume that's going to shrink, probably.
Yes. Well, normally from my memory from 08-09 is that actually it was volume. People don't want to sell at a loss unless they absolutely have to. But we'll see. I want to also look at the geography chart that you showed, and obviously we see the US getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but Florence, all I hear about is Paris, and how amazing things are in Paris and how everyone should open. And of course, I'll give a plug for this fair, which is going to have its Paris version in October. And in fact, you're on the selection committee, aren't you?
Yeah, I traveled to Basel a few hours after we ended the selection committee of Paris Plus, so it's a bit back and forth, back to the future.
Is it as exciting? Is the energy
extremely exciting, and the situation in Paris is like really dazzling these days. It's like so many galleries that over the year. I mean, there are historical gallery whose mother house is based in and opened in Paris, such as Marianne Goodman or Thaddeus Ropach or Carsten Greve. But since maybe 18 months, it's like blooming. Also interesting in terms of geography, or it changes the geography inside the city itself. With the area of Matignon, which is really developing more than the historical Marais. Well, this is obviously post-Brexit situation regarding travel, taxes, customs, blah, blah. But I think now also the opening of Paris Plus being confirmed and now very much expected. It's not only those new galleries that opened very recently, but I've heard many, I cannot tell the names because it's not yet public, but many others, and also hype young people that want to come, or very big, very important financially galleries. So to a point, for instance, Air de Paris, we represent Carsten Höller. He has now 4 galleries in Paris since...
4 other galleries?
No,
plus
4
you.
with us, yeah.
And that's a lot of
It's a lot,
galleries for
actually.
one artist in one city.
It will need like good dinners to address collaboration.
I mean, is it welcome? I mean, is it is it welcome? Is there a limit to how far the international market can go in Paris, or?
I have no idea. I mean, I think anyway it will go to another. I think it will shift maybe after 10 or 2 or 3 decades. So I don't think there is a limit. I myself moved one step out of the city, so I'm in what is called now Greater Paris, because the city is like enlarging, obviously. And so when most new galleries coming from abroad settle inside the ring, me and 5 other colleagues, we actually moved a few yards and based now in another city, which is called Romainville, which is the Greater Paris. So there are this like movement. It's a bit like a Monopoly game, and personally, I started in Nice, which had been a marketplace, but in the 60s, an artist place in the 60s, and which when we settled in Nice, there was nothing. Then the idea is like somehow I think I like peripheries. Yes. So maybe the question is also about centers, peripheries, and even in a global system, you have various centers and various peripheries. It's a bit like a cell.
And that certainly seems to be a pandemic-related phenomenon, that there are more cells around the world. But Claire, Florence mentioned Brexit. My experience in London has been it's certainly been a bit depressed. And one dealer told me the other day that what used to take 3 hours now takes 3 weeks in terms of the red tape. But then we had quite a good auction season earlier this year. I mean, do you think your numbers might go up a bit for London this year?
London's in a tricky position because it's had kind of all the downsides of Brexit without having the good sides. So one thing I think the art trade was hoping for, and they've certainly been lobbying like hell for, was to get rid of things like import VAT and those things that were all European directives that they don't need to have anymore.
Which is now at 5%.
5%, still the lowest in Europe, but it's still, and there's ways around it. There's a temporary admission scheme. There's all complicated ways, but it's all that red tape and stuff. So if you've got a choice now, say for the multinational companies like Christie's or Sotheby's, they have a vendor and they say, do you want to sell in New York, where it's more or less tax-free, you can import it for free. You can sell in Hong Kong, it's tax-free, or you can sell in London, where it might be tax-free depending on the buyer, as long as you keep it there for 2 years. Like there's this big complicated, so all those things do add to the perception that it's kind of still a kind of a complicated place versus those other 2 big centres. So now it's got the problem with having taxes to and from Europe, but also it's still not in a primary position with its main competitors in the US and the UK. So it does feel like it's taken all the hits from Brexit without yet getting the benefits from it. But I mean, they are working very hard in the art trade, I know for a fact, to try and work on those things. And import VAT is an issue at the moment that they're particularly looking at, because to be a hub, to be a hub, you need things to flow in and out easily and preferably for free.
And that is what we look at the geographic data, you see somewhere like New York, it is such an easy place to do business. And that's fine.
And I mean, Paris was obviously the center of the art market, but it was kind of regulatory things and taxes, and although we worked very hard with the French art trade as well to get the government to import VAT, they were going to raise it to 10%, and we got them to reduce it to 5.5%. So it's the second lowest in Europe. But there is still those complications of external things coming into Paris and the rest of Europe that they've always had. So they haven't changed. In Brexit.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. I'm going to move us digitally now, as we have the global head of online sales here with us. But I mean, you were one of the first galleries to go online. I think pre-pandemic you were talking about OVRs before we all didn't want to hear about them anymore. But you also, I remember David Zwirner describing his online presence as like another gallery in terms of the investment you put in and the time and obviously the hiring of you. What do you, and it's not completely surprising from the numbers that, you know, IRL took over from online a bit, but clearly we are taking a lot of it with us now. What have you experienced within your business that we will take forward? I mean, I know you don't like the word OVR anymore, for example, but what do you like going forward, and what do you see?
Great overview, and thank you for the summary, so I don't have to run through that. But indeed, when I was hired, it was so amazing because we really first envisioned it as a physical space. And so that just gave us a perfect model in a way to resource it, to staff it, to think about inventory allocation and programming. And through the pandemic, instead of, you know, pivoting, we have just scaled up and evolved. And so coming into a place where we're all learning to cope and live with the sort of new normal, for us, online is sort of stronger and more of a pillar than ever. And now, and this may not sound so exciting, but it's really the integration and the hybrid nature of everything that is physical and digital. And I was actually looking at the presentation and I was thinking, in 5 years from now, could we even pick apart online sales from physical sales? Because it really, I feel like that is becoming so seamless and it's such a constant handoff, because what we're striving for is really a multi-touch customer experience.
And can you, because I know you've done something with your Marlene Dumas that I have seen in beautiful, amazing Marlene Dumas on the front of their booth here. But it is also your online. Can you explain what you're doing to explain your hybrid or high touch?
Of course. I mean, we know that online serves as an incredible sales tool, and we all relied on it in the pandemic. But of course, it's also a key content and really way of disseminating content. And for us, the two go hand in hand always. And so what we were able to do with, you know, the Art Basel week is not only present, you know, an extension of the fair online, but really then do dedicated, you know, a drop of Raymond Pettibon wave prints that launched today. Last week, Catherine Bernhard works on paper, and last week also these two presentations of exceptional works, which is now actually a separate team that works on sort of, you know, including the consignments and online sales within that. And so the Marlene Dumas, which is on our booth and just is so truly such a highlight of, you know, her practice, especially for anyone who's seen the Venice show, is also, you can really get the context. And what's interesting is, you know, to see that piece, which is the back, and it's called The Secret. There's actually a fellow piece that was the front, which is in Venice. And again, this is such a simple thing, but you really get that story if you only look at it in that singular. And so online is you're really able to provide all of that. And so again, we see that any collector coming to our booth that's considering that work, we hope has actually looked at that, you know.
Well, that was my next question. I mean, what feedback, does it work? Does it work? Are people looking further than the booth? And is it, are sales going up?
And I think that is where the innovation is coming from. It's really refining that experience so it's completely seamless, because you don't want your collector to be aware of where they're being online and offline. You want them to just have a really almost seamless experience where they're getting something that is, whether it's a PDF preview or an online, you know, digital presentation that's evolving then into seeing the work in person, and hopefully whether it's a sale or just getting to know the artist and discover the work. And so all of those touch points, which before were very binary and frictionless, is really kind of creating a very smooth experience. And of course, you know, innovating with the content types along the way. And so we had Program, which launched during the pandemic, which was a live stream sort of, you know, moment that for us, for example, was a new way to create, again, audience engagement and really take the online experience out of a very passive one into something that the audience could interact with.
Thank you. And Florence, in this utopia, where do you fit? I mean, you definitely developed your online content and offering during the pandemic. Are you still doing as much now?
We had started doing online exhibitions, but more like a playful ground for a different way of curating an exhibition. This we started in 2018, so there was
also
no.
before.
It was more like another territory, and we've then, of course, during the pandemic, developed this more and sent newsletters every day, which were also a bit like the editorial of a newspaper, of a daily newspaper, talking about our own experience and that of our artists in the situation where we were all stuck together or not. And we've invited collectors, artists such as Ima for Joseph Grigory to curate some of those online exhibitions. So we don't call them online rooms. We say viewing rooms for Florence, it's exhibitions. And for the notion of online or offline, I'm more comfortable with the idea of being away from keyboards than being offline, because I think in real life today definitely contains internet. So it can't be separated. You can just be away from keyboard and talk instead of maybe write for the moment. And after the pandemic, I think I slowed down. I've not done any I haven't done any exhibition online since since my mask went
Came
down.
off.
Yeah.
So you're focusing
on
on real life.
But I'll be back. I mean, but for me, it's more a game than a business.
And do you see that as well, Claire? I mean, when Elena talks about, one day that line not being there, is that something when you've done your analysis and asked people for numbers, is it already a bit of a, I'm not sure where we solved this problem?
Yeah, no, it's one of the hardest questions to survey galleries with, and I tried to break it down with online, and then there's art fairs, whether they sold at the fair, or whether they pre-sold, sold after the fair. So the question is going to be a page long. But, and I mean, as you said, exactly that a lot of people say in the kind of comments, and people that I speak to as well say that, it's really hard to place a sale because somebody sees you online and then comes to see you in the gallery and then, buys it a different way. And the opposite as well. Someone meets you in person and sees the work and then goes and buys it online. So it is the kind of it's a little bit of a slightly made up thing, but it's an interesting thing to track nonetheless. But it is going to get much more complicated to watch.
Well, it's funny because the economist and KPI driven, lead in me is wants the numbers, but then there's a realization that actually, no, this is the future.
Yes.
Everything is not going to be clear, and we have to just embrace that.
It's another challenge for you, Claire.
I've had enough challenges, thanks.
I now have to ask you about NFTs, Elena. I mean, you're not one of the galleries that has a platform. In fact, another report, not Claire's, you'll be glad to know I can't remember the name, but another report that I read found that galleries actually have a very, very little exposure to NFTs and NFT platforms, maybe compared to auction houses who seem quite quickly to have co-opted them. But where do you, maybe you and David Zwirner don't stand in the same place on that, because you're quite excited by NFTs.
I'll clarify that, and I will certainly add that I speak only for my behalf, not for the gallery nor David. It is for me looking at this, if I was to look at all of, opportunities within Web3 space, because I think that that's the fair sort of analysis here to make, and whether it's nothing or whether it's the complete future, it's somewhere in between. And so there, what I really think that, personally, what you mentioned, that it went from 2019, a few million, to literally 11 billion, with 100-fold year-over-year growth, it's not sustainable. And it's really built on hype and speculation and really sort of such a drive for just a monetary pursuit. And real culture is not built on that foundation. So I think what we're seeing now, whether it's crypto winter 2.0 or basically a resetting of the values is actually healthy. It's going to give the creators and those who can build infrastructure on top of the technology the long run space and sort of much less pressure to actually develop things. And so much like when the internet came, you needed to build layers and layers of infrastructure for that, for everyone to come on and use it. I feel the same about Web3. And so for me, I do, and in my past, with Artsy and other curatorial projects, I have worked with digital artists. I think for them, I'm excited when real digital artists start to take on this space. I think we're not fully there yet. It's still very little culture being sort of genuinely produced, but I am more optimistic than some people.
And is that distinct from your artists who might want to play around and mint an NFT? This is a new wave. These are artists in a new field, or a bit of both?
I think that, if you go to a museum or institution, for the most part, you see a lot of ephemeral, time-based, performance, video media. And that is not currently necessarily making its way to collectors and certainly not to the auction houses. And so I think there's going to be a lot of great artists who are making work for whom it just makes sense what in the past, in the 60s, would have been a certificate or whatnot, when it's digitally native, to really think of it in that way and, again, encrypt it on blockchain. I will avoid using the NFT word because I think in itself that is also really loaded.
And Web3 maybe is also a bit loaded. I think this is the thing. It's become a kind of divisive. They've become divisive topics. But I think, as Claire's slides show, it's not going. They're not going away yet.
I think the Web 2.5 is what we're all in for in some near future, obviously.
Yes. That's right. And Florence, are your artists interested in NFTs, or are you seeing any impact on your video artists? Is it helping?
No.
No. Brilliant.
I mean, it's not that I'm for or against, even though I tend to think that for the moment it's mostly a new banknote, and that the art is totally secondary. But I agree with you when you say that when real, it's not again the right word, but when artists will properly go digital, NFT might be renamed and be another media, which is totally fine. For the moment, I see only white, male, rich tech kids that have one more reason to stick to their terminal.
It's very homogenous right now. And I think to your point of it's every 30 days that trading value, I mean, I don't think artists want to create into that environment.
Yeah, no.
I think the data from non-fungible for last year was 75% secondary market sales, and I think even for this year it's 90% secondary sales. So it's still, that. I think it's not all artists creating things. It's secondary market sales. But then when you talk to artists about it too, I was listening to Simon Denny this morning, and he wrote a really good thing in the report as well. There's so many interesting applications, and even on the financial side for philanthropy and fundraising and all that kind of stuff that will come out of NFTs. So I mean, the bit that nobody really likes is that kind of speculative, things being quickly. Although that. If it can be figured out, can generate income for artists as well. So it's not all bad. And anything that's going at that level, as you said, is going to eventually settle down at some.
And of course, it's
level.
been mapping cryptocurrencies very, very closely in terms of speculation. So at the moment, I love the term crypto winter because it implies there'll be a crypto spring. So that's probably good news for some people. We are sat in the middle of an art fair, so I'm going to swiftly move us to art fairs. And because Claire, your slides, there were a certain number of art fairs that you said in your report didn't seem to come back in 2021. I can't remember exactly. Was it about 100 out of 387 or something? I mean, and we have a new fair coming in Paris. We have a new fair coming in South Korea. It's the complete opposite of what I thought would happen. Clearly, people are still making money from fairs, and that's why they're still here. But I wondered if each of you could tell me what do you think the value is of an art fair before I open it up to questions. We'll go this way. We'll start with Elena. What is the value of an art fair in the 21st
I'm online,
century?
And yet I see such immense value. Just having this density of talent and ideas and amazing artworks and collectors coming together. It's so important, and you really can't fully replicate that online. And what you can do is really make it seamless. And I think that if you look at tech companies, Elon getting everyone to the office and even tech conferences.
Yeah.
There's a realization there that you still need the human connection. And so while we will do an art fair, in Taiwan or Shanghai 1 week of the year, all the other weeks online is our presence. So the two are just really synchronous and really have to work together. That's how I see it.
Positive future. Florence?
There was an art fair in Paris, or before Paris Plus.
I know that very much. I was very fond of it.
So it's not one more fair.
Fair enough.
It's a substitution for the best, I think.
They're not calling it a substitution, but yes, I can see that.
I can only say that I'm not. I'm running a gallery since 32 years. I've never been very fond of fairs because of the concentration and of the hyper market. And I'm so happy this year to be there. So one can change his mind, and I think it's very nice to be there. In that fair, and that it starts again. I'm happy of that. I wouldn't have guessed. But
I've had a similar reaction.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't know how much you like something till they take it away. But Claire, also, business travel was something I saw, or travel, where people expect that to go right back to and we haven't talked about the sustainability points, but do you get the impression that collectors, they're just very happy to get back on planes and
everybody, it's not COVID related. Everyone for the last several years, the galleries have been complaining about the amount of fairs they have to do, and the cost of booths and the cost of traveling and the cost of not keeping the home fires burning, if you like, while they're away doing fairs all year round. So I think, there's been some consolidation coming before COVID. But I think what the auctions were really good at last year was getting new buyers all the time, and I think that's still what fairs are really good at doing as well, is getting new people involved, because you have the privilege of seeing so many things in one place, and you can kind of wander through without having to, if you're a new kind of young collector, you don't necessarily have to talk to anybody. You can just look at everything, and everything's there on a plate for you. So I think that's where galleries were relying heavily in terms of the surveys, what we saw on their established collectors for the last couple of years. So I think that's where the weak spot is without fairs, is reaching out to new buyers and mutualizing each other's.
And there was that thing, wasn't there, about the act of discovery for collectors to find new artists as well. Is actually when we were all online, there was this tendency for people to buy what they knew.
Already. I think that buying online is really easy if you know what you're looking for, and if you know the artist already and you're just buying another work by them even, that can be, or if you know the gallery really well and they can point you in the right direction. But if you don't know those things, it's just such a sea of different offerings online that it's actually really difficult, I think, for people to decipher.
I can tell you for free, it's a lot nicer to do a talk in real life than on Zoom, so thank you. I've got a few more questions of my own, but I thought I'd let you guys ask some first in case we're drowning in questions. Are there any questions from anyone about the future of the art market? I see lots of galleries. You don't have any questions about the future of the art market in 2022? There we do, this gentleman here, thank you.
Yes. When one talks about new contemporary artists being discovered, how important are galleries in developing them versus the Instagram world and that sort of?
This is that great, yes, the great word disintermediation. Do we need galleries? Is that the question? But yes, what does a gallery do that Instagram can't do? Both of you.
Interact with the artists, talk with them.
I mean, I would say that at the point that we're generally working with artists, they're already somewhat established, but I can speak both as a collector and working on Platform, which is the younger galleries, platform we launched online basically to give that kind of attention. It is really provide that context and provide structure, and I think it's again very complementary. I think that for us, Instagram is our whole world, but of course you shift over and it's WeChat in Asia, and so I think it's just the idea that now there's omni-channels that are coming at us, and sort of as a gallery you hopefully help sort of shape that narrative and also give your artists the opportunity to do what they should be doing, which is in their studio, and not having to actually like promote and manage their career.
Is there a validation point as well? I mean, is it because there's so much out there, in a way fair as well? They're saying these are 300 of the best galleries, you can trust them. Is there an element of that, or is that us feeling very safe in our own environment?
Great question. I mean, I think to some collectors that is, but I don't think to everyone. And I think to the point of discovery and new collectors coming into the space, they will likely know who Kusama or Raymond Pettibon is more than they will know who the gallery is. And maybe it's different for younger artists, but again, I think there's it's different channels of discovery, and it's really just it's ultimately whichever one the collector gets on a path, and hopefully
embrace them all as a gallerist. Were there any other questions? There's one at the back. Yes, thank you.
Hi, Melanie. Thanks very much.
Hi.
It'd be interesting, obviously, to hear your point of view on the art fair question that you asked, since, of course, you've written a book on the subject. I had a question. I'm based in Paris, and I see very, very many galleries opening. I feel like every week there's a new gallery opening, or 2 or 3. Is that backed up by, is that anecdotal? Is that backed up by the statistics? And what is the main thing driving that for you all? Thank you.
I think that's a really good observation, actually, that there seems to be more bricks and mortar that has come out of the pandemic, when we thought we all wanted to be online. Is that partly because real estate is cheaper, or why? And is that? I mean, have you got data?
We'll be checking in
that?
again to see. We only do this every 2 years, the number of businesses, because it's kind of a slower turnover. But they are opening. They're opening. It's just how many are closing as well. You have to kind of see what the net openings are. But I mean, some of that is Brexit related, yes. I'm sure, because people want to base in Europe, and it was always London was a no-brainer. But now you have to, if you want to shift works, you have to pay an import duty.
Yes.
And so I think that's definitely helped. There's probably lots of other factors as well, but that is definitely one thing.
Florence, do you want to open another gallery somewhere? Do you think about it?
Also, for instance, for Paris Plus, they certainly thought about the number of hotels, restaurants, reputation of the city in terms of leisure, so side reasons which bring someone be willing to come to settle in a city. So then there is this probably overdone reputation of so many institutions which actually don't buy so much in regards of other countries, but are numerous in number. So it's probably good and bad reasons. It's probably reasons that are based on something real, and some which is just small talk. And then I think this brings a movement which increases like a circle in the water, until the moment that it will go toward another destination, most probably. So you were asking about to which point it will be too much. I think it will never be too much. It will slide, shifts in another location. So for the moment it's Paris, a bit of hazard and some good reasons, I guess.
And you opened in Paris. In fact, I think you did. The gallery said Brexit Brexit changes the game, I think
I think you probably wrote the article there.
Still my favorite quote ever that anyone's ever given me. But you also hear anecdotally of, I get a sense as well that there are more galleries opening than there has been for a while.
Well, as I mentioned, since I'm based part of my year actually in Brussels, so I definitely have one foot in the in Europe, and I'm very happy that there is sort of a great energy that is really swelling up in Paris. I think it has to do with the collectors, and much like you say, also this amazing city that actually people want to come to, that artists want to show at, which is also very exciting for a gallery. And ultimately, we needed a gallery in Europe, and that was going to be our spot.
Yeah, fascinating. I think we've got time for one more. There's a gentleman with his hand up. Okay, I'll let you have two more if they're both quick. Oh.
Hi, I just wonder if you have the potential to turn NFT collectors into collectors of solid artworks. Is that part of the process? As they're probably younger, and they still need something to put on their walls, not just look on their.
I don't know. They live in the metaverse.
Yeah, exactly.
I know the auction houses have certainly played that game. Is that in your end game?
I think it's already. Although we don't, sell NFTs, we have. Collectors who are very much, especially in New York being such a hub for that, who are active in that space, who are coming to the gallery and are, really drawn to the program. I think creative people are attracted, and, tech, and especially frontier tech, attracts a lot of creative thinkers. And so inevitably, I see a great translation between the two, and I don't think it'll be limited. I think that those people who collect NFTs will cross over, and if anything, that I'm kind of astounded by the ability of NFTs to actually reach people at a whole new level that galleries and museums might not always be able to, because geographically speaking, we're not there.
Fascinating. Thank you. And then there was one more question in front. Oh, do you mind just waiting for the microphone? Thank you.
I'm a collector from New York.
Hello.
Somebody asked me a question recently. There is 1 million artists at any given time. At any given time, there are 400 of them that everyone is chasing. 200 are staying there for a long time. 200 are coming and going. So the artists ask me, what do I have to do to be within those 200s? I turned this question to you. I told him that a lot of it's an element of luck. It's a lot of it of sort of endorsement of a gallery where he is going to have a show, but it's more complicated than this. So any thoughts on this?
Florence, what turns you from the 800 to the 200 as an artist?
I don't think that you find a reply to such a question. You just stumble on it. It doesn't mean it has to do only with luck, but you should not look for it as a first step. That's what I would say to an artist. Don't.
Do you ever say to people? I remember someone saying to me, "Oh, just buy what you like," and I'm thinking that would be a really bad idea because maybe if you're not thinking about investment, you have more of a chance.
Yes.
I think this is why we get it's the superstar phenomenon that economists have been looking at for years in sports and in all things that people don't buy what they like. They buy what successful people buy. And this is why the focus is on 200 instead of lots of things. And when I see things, there's kind of people buying into fractional ownership and things like that, which are really interesting concepts. But, if people think that you can't buy something good unless you have like $1 million or something like that. So instead of spending a little bit on a kind of a relatively unknown artist, they prefer to buy a piece of a well-known artist. So it's just that thing of people. I think the differences in success are much larger than the differences in talent or quality, if you could ever measure that.
Yes.
in the arts.
I think that's a lovely way to end it. I'm going to have to say thank you so much. Elena, thank you for your amazing insights. Florence, you too. And Claire, I would be remiss not to thank you a little bit more because it's Claire's birthday today. And she has come and spoken on a panel. Thank you.
Birthday!
Thank you.